For folks that don't know who I am, I'm a series producer and co-host of Stella's favourite podcast, Mothers of Invention.
My favourite, as you say, for many reasons, one of which is your humour, the way in which you guys really, come at climate change and talk about it in all corners of the world, all different women, and fight for the cause, I think in a light-hearted way, but then with solutions, which is critical. We've talked about this before. Really leading with some answers, which I think everyone's looking for.
Exactly. There's still 10 years to go.
Yeah.
There are irreversible effects on planet Earth. But that's 10 years that we can get so much stuff done. I meet so many amazing women climate leaders all over the world who are on top of it and have been on top of it.
So what's going on today? Who are we introducing in our trilogy? Who's up next?
Today, Maeve is going to be talking to Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, who, for the record, is a boss. She's amazing. Ayana is a marine biologist, a policy expert, and has just published a book called All We Can Save that was edited by herself and another of our previous Mothers of Invention, Catherine Wilkinson. Ayana and Catherine's book is actually just another brilliant way to learn how women are working their butts off to make sure that every single one of us has a climate-safe future ahead of us.
Well, we're in it together.
Exactly. Nailed it. Catherine was one of the authors of Project Drawdown, which figured out the best possible solutions to make sure our global temperature rise doesn't go over 1.5 degrees centigrade, because not going over that number is the aim of the game, really, because it means we can keep our planet looking and feeling the way it does now, and perhaps even greener and healthier than ever, actually. So according to NASA, in March 2020, the global land and ocean surface temperature was 1.16 degrees higher than last century's average. But we're actually on track for a 4-degree temperature rise by 2100, which is enormous.
So this is just all light-hearted, kind of easy, everyday conversation then that we're going to have here. I'm thrilled that she's agreed to be part of this. I think it's critical. She's one of the leaders, which such incredible work, watching her and her career and watching everything that she's been fighting for.
If anyone's seen all that footage from California, all the wildfires and red skies and things.
Which seems to be happening kind of every month.
Right?
I mean, it doesn't feel like long ago we were looking at California with mudslides and fires, and it seems like it's happening more and more frequently, sadly.
Totally.
I mean, I can't wait to hear this, actually. I can't wait to see the book as well, because I know it's an amazing piece of work. So I'm really, really happy and excited to have her as part of this.
It's brilliant. Let's listen to Ayana then.
I am so thrilled to introduce everyone to Dr. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. Ayana, hello. Let me just tell people something about you. There's a lot to say, but you're a marine biologist, a policy expert, a writer, and a Brooklyn native.
Yeah.
Is that all?
Those are some of the descriptors. Yeah.
Wait, are you in Brooklyn at the moment, or where do we find you?
I am out on Long Island. I was missing the ocean. I hadn't seen the ocean in a super long time, so I'm in Montauk today.
I follow you on Instagram. I find it educational, but also for your mom's farm.
Yeah, so my mom lives right in the geographic center of New York State with this little family farm, and I've just learned a ton about how to produce food. And I will tell you, I will never, ever again argue with anyone at the farmer's market about the cost of a tomato. It is extremely hard to grow these like beautiful vegetables that come to us. So I have, a much deeper appreciation for our food system and all the work that farmers do.
Yeah, for sure. And as well as land, of course, being a marine biologist, I feel like you've always had an appreciation for the sea. And I've spoken to you before for Mothers of Invention. We spoke to you on episode 3. It was called Fish Out of Hot Water. It's also like how I found out there are seahorses living in New York. They're like New Yorker seahorses living under piers in the Hudson River.
It's pretty bananas. I didn't know that until like 2 years ago, and now I'm completely obsessed.
You wake up thinking about it.
I'm like, what are they doing today? Should I go visit them? Are we going to hang out? No, I'll just like wish them well from afar.
Are they homeschooling during the pandemic?
Did you know that seahorse dads are like super good caretakers? They have like a kangaroo kind of a pouch where they hold all the little babies and like keep them safe. The dads are like on it.
I just assumed that was the mom.
You know what happens when you assume, Maeve? You make mistakes about seahorse reproductive biology is what happens.
I know that you're also the founder of the Ocean Collective and the Urban Ocean Lab, which makes sense now that we're talking about these seahorses that live in the city. Where did you first fall in love with the ocean and I suppose like the idea of ocean conservation?
The ocean love part came first. I didn't know the ocean needed conserving when I fell in love with it. It was when I was 5 years old and first saw the ocean, really. I went on a family vacation to Key West, Florida, and my parents taught me to swim and they took me on a glass bottom boat ride. And I saw a coral reef and I was like, what? There's like this whole other universe happening under the surface of the ocean. Like, why did no one tell me about this? I have so many questions. And to see a coral reef as your first thing too, I mean, it's so colorful and I was super into it. Of course, only like a decade later did I find out that the reefs I was seeing in Florida in like 1985 were already just a shadow of their former abundance and glory. And so I kind of fell in love with coral reefs as they were dying. And my career has been just like watching them fall apart, which is a pretty big bummer.
It's devastating. And I think something that I love about you is you turn that devastation into action where you can, and you use your extensive education.
So much school.
You're a doctor, right? So that's like many years.
I am a marine biology doctor.
Yes.
Not terribly useful in some ways, but handy in others.
No, I know. Like if you're on an airplane and somebody says,
I can't
they're a
help
doctor.
if you're having a heart attack. But if you like need someone to explain ocean climate policy, I'm here for you.
Good. So who is involved in your Urban Ocean Lab and what are the kind of policy goals of that organization?
Urban Ocean Lab is a think tank for the future of coastal cities. And the idea there is that, you know, about a third of people in the US live in coastal cities, and we don't really have a plan for what to do in terms of sea level rise and storms becoming more frequent and severe and heat waves and all of this. And coastal cities have just a sort of different set of issues, right?
That's so many millions of people living in coastal cities that really...
Yeah, you hear this whole thing like coastal elite, and I'm like, it's 3 in 10 Americans. And a lot of those people are, you know, working class and people of color, and we got to figure it out.
No, for sure. And also we've already seen, even just this summer, there's been these major weather events, you know, obviously the fires on the West Coast, but then the intensity of Hurricane Laura, Hurricane Sally, like what do we need to do, I suppose, about these kind of climate fueled hurricanes that are hitting the coastal cities and are getting much worse?
It's a really hard question. And the answer is in part that we need to think about not just how we rebuild, but whether we rebuild and where we rebuild. Because, you know, if we keep rebuilding in the same place, especially if we do it in the same way, we're simply putting people in harm's way continually. And so helping communities figure out a plan to transition to safer areas is something that, you know, governments need to start facilitating. So that's one of the themes of our work with Urban Ocean Lab, is figuring out what is the policy framework we need to deal with sea level rise and changes in extreme weather events, to think about coastal ecosystems and how we can protect and restore them so they can protect us. They're actually a great buffer from storms, often better than seawalls. What does offshore renewable energy look like? Wind and solar offshore as a way to power cities, especially where there's like not enough land to put solar panels everywhere. And all of these major changes require policy change. We need a new framework to not just prevent the bad stuff, but enable the good stuff. And so that's the kind of thing that we're working on with Urban Ocean Lab, is figuring out, you know, how do we envision and design the future of coastal cities? And then how do we create a policy framework that enables us to have that future? That's what I spend my days thinking about. And right now it's a lot more questions than answers, right? Like we don't know exactly what to do, but getting all the smartest people that you know together to really focus on it seemed like a good step.
What you're saying shouldn't be that unusual to hear. The fact of, you know, that you're talking about, well, should we rebuild and is that the best thing to do? But so often I hear after these terrible weather events, it's like, we're going to rebuild and we're going to come back.
You hear the same thing after the fires. People are like, I'm going to build my house in the same place. I'm like, it's a really dangerous place. You have all this money from your insurance. Like, let's maybe rethink things. But I get it, because of course you're tied to a place. If that's a place your family has lived for generations, or you have really important memories, or you have a deep connection with the landscape. All of those are, of course, really valid, but the world is changing, and it's changing really fast. And so some traditions don't make sense to hold on to. Some places, some infrastructure doesn't make sense to hold on to in the way that it's been before. And I think that's just really hard psychologically to get our heads around, just like how much is changing and how quickly, and just that we need to figure out some new ways of living with this changed climate.
Yes, on rebuilding in the same places, we recently had Colette Pichon Battle featured in our current season of Mothers of Invention. It's episode 3. It's called Universal Language. And as you know, Colette is the founder of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy. And she talked about, what you mentioned, which is the loss of heritage that these entire communities are facing and what to do. And she also, of course, talks a lot and knows deeply about the intersection of racial justice and disaster relief. So can you tell us about Colette?
Colette is absolutely one of the luminaries in the climate movement. She is from the Bayou in Louisiana. She has helped her community recover from Hurricane Katrina and now additional hurricanes. She's leading on policy development for a red, black, and green New Deal that actually centers climate justice in the policy development with the movement for Black lives. So she's working at these intersections of the movement for Black lives and the climate movement, and making sure communities have a say in what the future looks like. And she will be interviewed on my podcast this week for our Black Lives Matter episode, because obviously every podcast about climate should have a Black Lives Matter episode. So here we are. Thank you, 2020, for finally helping us connect the dots. So Colette gave this incredible TED Talk right as Catherine and I were finishing editing the book. We saw her talk and just sort of like said, stop the presses. We need this to be an essay in the book. And it's about, how her community dealt with Hurricane Katrina and what adapting to storms will mean. This is a fun tidbit. There are 10 women in the anthology of TED Talks, and TED made a playlist of all of them, which is called Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis, which is the subtitle of the book. And so if you want to just spend your evening with all of these brilliant women leading on climate solutions, we've got a playlist for you now.
That's excellent. I do think that lots of the people watching are wondering what to do and how they can help and how they can learn more. And the resources are there, actually. People have been in the fight for a very long time and are so welcoming and willing to share what they know and what they do. One way that you really, I think, reach people is through your writing. You wrote this incredibly powerful piece for Scientific American in June, and it basically talked about what you've been saying, which is look to the ocean for clean, renewable energy, but also you talk about the kind of less tangible capacity of the ocean. You mentioned as well, you've now left the city specifically to go to the ocean. So can you talk about that?
One of the things a lot of people have, I think, noticed or gained a renewed appreciation for during the pandemic is how important it is to have nature in our lives, right? Everyone's been flocking to parks and planting things, and just thank goodness that this all happened in the springtime when things were starting to bloom, and just this appreciation for nature. And for me, the ocean just makes me so happy, just to be in it or on it or near it. And so I think having a healthy ocean is core to our well-being. There's research showing that it's actually really good for our mental health to be in nature, and the ocean is certainly included in that. And what we don't see when we look at the ocean is that it has absorbed over 93% of the heat the excess heat that's been trapped by all the greenhouse gases we've emitted by burning fossil fuels.
Wow.
So the planet would be like insanely hotter if it weren't for the ocean having absorbed the vast majority of the heat we've trapped, and it's absorbed about a third of the carbon dioxide we've emitted by burning fossil fuels. So the ocean is really a major part of the climate system. It's buffering what would otherwise be so much worse. And so basically, I just feel like the ocean needs to be seen as a hero and not just a victim. Like, it's really preventing us from what would otherwise be an even more dangerous situation. And we can also look to the ocean for renewable energy and sustainable seafood with regenerative farming of the ocean, of seaweeds and shellfish. We can look to the ocean coastal ecosystems to protect us from storms, and they can absorb 5 times more carbon than a forest on land. So like, let's not forget the ocean. And so that's been, one of my drum beats for the past few years is like, hey, Green New Deal, sure, but like, we gotta make it a little bit bluer. Like, let's not forget that all of these solutions, all these policy opportunities exist at the coast and out into the ocean.
So are you talking about like the kind of swamp, the mangroves, like those?
Yeah, mangroves and seagrasses and wetlands and marshes.
Wetlands,
coral reefs, oyster reefs, all of that.
They're the ones that absorb 5 times more than a forest on land?
Wetlands in particular are like super good at absorbing carbon into their soils.
So let me see if I've got this. Amplifying voices of women at the forefront of the climate issue, the global women looking for climate solutions, the intersections of climate justice, racial justice, and social justice, all brought together by women. That sounds a lot like Mothers of Invention, but it's actually your book, All We Can Save. So congratulations, that book has just been published. It's so cool.
It is cool. I'm pretty excited.
I've been reading it. I love it.
Oh, thank you. It's an anthology that I've co-edited with Dr. Catherine Wilkinson, who you know well and is an advisor to Mothers of Invention and has been on your show. She and I got together and said, we know so many brilliant women doing critical work on climate. How come no one else knows about them? How come no one else is, championing them loudly enough? And we thought, like, what can we do to amplify these voices and these experts? We thought we could bring the book to them and curate this anthology. So it has 41 essays spanning like science and policy and politics and art and design and journalism and science and all of these things. And it's been such a treat to see how it's being received by the world and, have something as multifaceted as the climate crisis and its solutions, I think is a really important manifestation of this. And it's got like 17 poems that are mixed in between the essays and all these incredible quotations from additional leaders and original illustrations, and it just became this like labor of love and beautiful project. So All We Can Save is now out in the world, and we really hope that it does what you just described, which is like help people find where they fit in to climate work, right? Help people find their role in the movement. Like, where do your skills match on to the work that needs doing? That's one of the things the climate movement has been missing, is giving people ways to use like what they're actually really good at to be helpful, as opposed to like everyone march, everyone donate, everyone vote, everyone obsess about your carbon footprint, even though it's something invented for us to all feel bad and not focus on systems change. And we should all like, do our part, but like also focus on the bigger picture.
No, for sure. And the book certainly does that. So, we're here on Stella's Instagram and there are tons of fashion fans watching. And I wanted to ask about one really cool essay in the book, which is certainly an example of like one person realizing where they fit in the scheme of things and using that. This essay, it is directed to fossil fuel executives and to bankers who make their work possible. And that's like what you would expect in a climate book, but perhaps what is less expected is the person who wrote this.
It's written by a supermodel.
Just a supermodel. Cameron Russell, one of the most beautiful and fantastic models working today.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about Cameron and how she got into this and what she does?
So Cameron's essay in All We Can Save is called Dear Fossil Fuel Executives.
Yeah.
She lays out some of the parallels between sort of the fast fashion industry and all the ways in which it's unsustainable and the fossil fuel industry as both being extractive and treating workers really poorly, obviously being a major source of pollution of both water and air.
The opening line to her essay is so stunning. She says something like, when I was 16, I discovered that I had oil.
Yeah, in her backyard, and felt dubious cashing in. And it was her looks, right?
And like, just as you're saying, it's because in a lot of ways, both of those industries are extractive and they can do a lot of harm, but there's huge profits to be made.
But there's other ways to produce clothes and there's other ways to produce energy, right? And so she sort of follows this whole parallel through. She's an extremely elegant writer and talks about her own work, which is, she was the co-founder of Model Mafia, which gathers all these models who really care about environmental and justice issues to use their platforms to raise awareness and activate people. Because if you've got like hundreds of thousands of people following you on Instagram because you look hot in a bikini, why not throw in some climate and Black Lives Matter facts in there for your audience? I love just the subversive way that they do things. Obviously, people want to take pictures of them when they're at climate marches. And so they've really sort of used their platforms to further the movement. And it's so dope.
Well, that's amazing. And I mean, obviously, not all of us can do that, right? Because
shake what your mama gave you, right? Like whatever is your thing.
Yes.
The climate movement needs it.
Now, as if you're not busy enough, we have mentioned your podcast. It's called How to Save a Planet, and we're hoping that you mean Earth.
We could start with that one, yeah.
How do you find podcasting?
It's such a joy to do this show. So my co-creator and co-host is Alex Bloomberg. We have Kendra, as you mentioned, as a reporter, and Rachel Waldholz is another reporter, and we've got a few producers, and it's just this incredible team, and we're able to tell stories that are about climate solutions people might not be thinking about from angles or a level of depth that people don't normally get to hear. We need people to hear these stories, like Colette's story, like Christine Nieves Rodriguez's story about how she's transformed her community in Puerto Rico to be able to be more resilient to climate, right? To hear Leah Penniman's story about being a farmer upstate New York and trying to figure out like how to feed her community, how to support the next generation of Black farmers. All of these really important stories, and a lot of the essayists in the book actually have become guests on the podcast because like they're just so great.
I'm sure that our listeners and everybody watching will want to keep track of what you're doing and learn more about these ways to be helpful, and about Urban Ocean Lab, about the book, the podcast. So where can they find you?
The place where all of that can be found all together is just my name, ayanaelizabeth.com. There's links to all of that stuff.
Yeah.
The book is All We Can Save, and at All We Can Save on social. Urban Ocean Lab is urbanoceanlab.org and at Urban Ocean Lab.
Yeah.
And the podcast is How to Save a Planet. On Spotify and wherever you get your podcast.
Well, thank you for everything you do. Also, it's cool, just as you were listing like the ways that we can follow you and find your work, it struck me that all of this is free. It's a very democratic thing that you're doing where it's accessible.
And for Urban Ocean Lab, we're developing a set of fact sheets for people who want to learn more about a lot of those issues. And for All We Can Save, that is not free, but we are fundraising to donate a lot of copies because we do care about making sure that everyone who really wants to get their hands on it will be able to. So stay tuned for more on book giveaways and all that stuff. If people prefer the listening to the reading, the audiobook for All We Can Save is bananas amazing. I called in like every favor to cast this thing. It's like this totally star-studded audiobook cast.
Wow.
And so if you prefer that, you'll get some good voices in your ear.
So don't forget, you can hear lots more inspiring climate justice women on our podcast, Mothers of Invention. You can track us down at Mothers Invent on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you so much for watching, and thanks to the wonderful Ayana, Dr. Ayana.
Thanks, Maeve.